It does not take a rocket scientist to understand how important this offseason is for the Arizona Cardinals. It is the third offseason for Monti Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon. They showed progress over their first 2 years here. And let's face it, when you are a brand new GM and a brand new head coach and you are brought in together, there is some house cleaning, some housekeeping that needs to be done over that first year, right? You have to completely evaluate all of the processes that were left over from the last regime. You have to look at the roster. You have to look at the practice schedule. You have to bring in your coaches. You have to install your culture. And oh, by the way, the guy you hired to be the head coach was a former defensive coordinator, so he's learning how to be a head coach. There's nothing wrong with that. It just takes time. He has to install the way he wants to coach things. He has to install the way he wants practice to run, how he wants each of his position groups to be coached. There's a lot of logistical work that needs to be done over that first year. Then you get to year 2, and you see a little bit of the progress, right? You see what we saw last year. You see a team that gets into the latter stages of the season and is in the mix. 6-4 going into the bye week. First place in the division. Playing meaningful football in December. Didn't work out. They didn't show up in those big games, but they played meaningful football. That is a box checked. They now need to get over the final major hump, which is this group with this regime breaking through and making the playoffs. They have a ton of cap space this offseason. This is the final year for Kyler Murray to answer the bell. I've said it before. I will say it again. If we are having some of the same conversations next offseason, the way we are this offseason, about struggling in December, struggling in the second half, struggling against the division, and ends without a playoff berth, Kyler Murray is not going to be on the 2026 Cardinals. I feel very comfortable saying that now. So it's a very big offseason. There have to be major results this year. You can't go into training camp, the start of the season, with a bunch of unanswered questions all over your roster. We can't be asking the same questions about the pass rush group. We can't be asking the same questions about who the backup quarterback is. We can't be asking questions about the wide receiver room. There are just some things about this team that need to be settled when we get to camp. And everybody knows what the biggest questions are. They land on the defensive side of the ball. I said at the beginning, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Look at any single publication that is starting to do off-season previews across the National Football League. CBS Sports, Yahoo Sports, PFF, The Ringer. You name the publication that might do the storyline of biggest off-season need for all 32 teams or biggest off-season question for all 32 teams. Whatever the framework might be, whatever publication you might read, it's pretty simple across the board. It's an easy question to answer. The Cardinals need to figure out what they're doing defensively. That was a patchwork effort all of last year. A impressive patchwork effort, but it was a patchwork effort. They were doing it with smoke and mirrors. Duct tape, Scotch tape. They were just patching holes left and right, just getting by. And they were playing pretty well. There was a stretch of the year where the defense was kind of lifting up the offense, was buying them time to try to get it into gear. But this offseason, they got to fill some of those holes permanently. We're not just using duct tape anymore. We're calling in the construction company. We're putting up new drywall. We're not just using command strips to cover up the holes. We are doing actual construction this offseason. That's where the resources are going to be focused. So here's the concern. Do you trust Monti Ossenfort to make those decisions? Do you trust him to oversee this construction project? Do you oversee him to bring in the right people for the job? Do you trust him to attack free agency in a way that will land the Cardinals in a better spot? When we get to training camp, I'll pull on a thread that we talked about yesterday. I said that the Arizona Diamondbacks, in my opinion, are a better baseball team right now than they were last year. When we get to training camp, how confident are you that the Cardinals will be a better team than they were last year? On paper, roster-wise. How confident are you? Somewhat confident? Very confident? Not confident? Would make a pretty good poll question. Maybe we should do some poll questions here moving forward. You know what, producer Dylan? Put that on the idea list. Do some poll questions. That would be a great one. How confident are you that the Cardinals roster will be better when training camp opens this year than where they were last year? Because look at the free agent acquisitions that Monti has made over his first couple of years. Is there anything to write home about? Is there a slam dunk in there? Last offseason, they signed Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols. Those are nice players. But guess what? Here we are in an offseason, still talking about the defensive line and needing an overhaul. We know that they haven't invested the resources into the edge group the way we would like. They made an in-season move for Baron Browning. We told you how that was going to go when they made the move. We said that they probably needed to do a little bit more. And Baron Browning is about to hit free agency, and nobody cares. There's not a single person out there that is clamoring for the Cardinals to bring him back. So that move, not that great. So we have Monti with limited draft capital, a so-so track record when it comes to free agents. Is he going to be able to make the impactful moves? And it's a free agent class that isn't all that great. And if there's one thing I would give Monti credit for, he is not the type of GM that feels like he is going to panic and all of a sudden trade a bunch of picks for Myles Garrett or make that big splash, especially when their draft capital is as limited as it is this year. So we are going to have to deal this offseason with a lot of patience. We're going to have to see what Monti is going to be able to cook up. Speaking of that, there's been this meme over the last couple of years of let Monti cook, right? When it comes to draft night, let him cook. Let him work. Let him work the phones. Let him maneuver around. Let him wheel and deal, do all that. And I can remember, sticks out to me like a sore thumb, everybody raving about the job Monti did in his first draft. Those videos of him wheeling and dealing on draft night, answering the phone, taking in a deal, looking at the board, calling other GMs. It was just a sight to behold. You felt like there was somebody who knew what they were doing at the wheel, right? You felt the confidence, right? You felt it ooze out of the videos that the Cardinals gave you. And rightly so. He handled that draft well. Guess what? Give me that GM handling free agency. Give me draft night Monti working in free agency. Give me that type of confidence. I don't feel that when it comes to free agency and Monti Ossenfort right now. Give me draft night Monti. Give me what we saw in those videos operating during the offseason. You give me that version of this GM, and you're going to have an impactful season. You are going to have an offseason that's going to lead us to say, yes, this roster is better than the one last year. Yes, they have answered all the questions. So give me that Monti Ossenfort. Give me draft night in his first year here, Monti, operating this offseason. If I get that guy, it's going to be a good offseason. You give me the guy that I've seen operating in free agency the first couple of years, I think we're going to have a lot of questions come training camp.